Hello, everyone, and welcome to America's Future Series panel titled Public-Private Partnerships, Facilitating Dual-Use Innovation. My name is Richard Jackson. I am the Deputy Attorney General for Cybersecurity, Technology, and Digital Assets for the state of Oklahoma. I'm a Commercial Engagement Lead for the Marine Innovation Unit's Technology Branch, and I will be moderating today's panel. This panel will focus on the role of the innovation facilitator, the critical element of coordination, support, coaching, and partner functions that many times are the key element in driving real results in defense innovation. Often cross-functional, usually inter-organizational, and frequently silo-busting synergy seekers, the innovation facilitator is a force multiplier for meaningful progress. And here today to discuss several of the important ideas around public-private partnerships are three panelists with a wealth of experience in dual-use technology, military operations, and innovation in novel and emerging technologies. They are technical experts, academic and practical research and development partners, investment and business operations specialists. The panelists really do consist of nation-leading contributors in dual-use technologies, and it is my pleasure to introduce them to you. The first panelist I have the honor of introducing is Mr. James Grimsely. Mr. Grimsely serves as the Executive Director for Advanced Technology Initiatives with the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, as well as an Oklahoma Transportation Commissioner with oversight and governance responsibilities for the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. Mr. Grimsely currently serves as on the Board of Directors for Commercial Drone Alliance, as well as a variety of other boards and advisory groups. As part of Mr. Grimsely's Choctaw Nation duties, he currently manages the FAA Beyond program and previously managed the FAA's Integration Pilot Program, the IPP, for the Choctaw Nation. And in October of 2022, the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Peter Buttigieg, appointed Mr. Grimsely to the FAA's Advanced Aviation Advisory Council. Mr. Grimsely has also served on multiple FAA aviation rulemaking committees, including the Beyond Visual Line of Sight ARC. James, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Our next panelist is Mr. Kevin McGinnis, Special Advisor to America's Frontier Fund, the first investment platform committed to reinvigorating our nation's innovation and manufacturing prowess in critical frontier of technology sectors. Kevin previously served as the Director for Research and Analysis on the National Security Commission for Artificial Intelligence, where he co-led the Commission's work on promoting and protecting U.S. technology advances, microelectronics, and public-private partnerships. And before that, as part of the Office of Management and Budget's National Security Division, where he provided oversight and strategic direction to the national defense investments across the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, the National Nuclear Security Administration, and the intelligence community. Kevin also served on the Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning team at the Defense Innovation Unit, helping to develop, launch, and manage the X-View Detection Challenge. And Kevin began his career in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, covering a range of issues, including defense partnerships in Latin America, global defense posture, and U.S. strategic forces. Kevin, glad you could be here.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Appreciate it. And our final panelist is Chad Raduege. Chad retired from the United States Air Force in 2023 as a general officer with 29 years of cyber operations, communications, and information technology experience. He is a 9-time commander, including the White House Communications Agency, and prior to his retirement, he served as Director of Command Control, Communications, Computers, and Cyber, as well as Chief Information Officer for U.S. European Command. Currently, Chad is Executive Director of the Oklahoma Cyber Innovation Institute at the University of Tulsa, focusing on developing, testing, and deploying cyber research outcomes and technology developments. Chad also serves as the Chairman and CEO of the Air Force Cyberspace and Air Traffic Control Association, and on the Board of Advisors for both the Military Cyber Professionals Association and the Air and Space Forces Association's Cyber Patriot program. Chad, thank you for coming on.
RJ, great to be here. Thanks.
Glad you could join us. Chad, we're going to start off with you. Just as the DoD has taken considerable steps to revamp its relationship towards modern technology, and we see it all over the space throughout the DoD and procurement, so too have universities made a modernization effort in the way that they go about academically oriented research and development, to the point of even reconsidering the entire academic R&D model. Can you tell us how academia has embraced these changes within the DoD and in academia, how the institute model differs from traditional academic research, and what the university and institute you are affiliated with does to promote innovation?
Yeah, well, thank you, RJ. A lot to unpack in your question, and I'm going to do my best to address this. First of all, it's a pleasure to join you and America's Future Series once again. This is a world-class organization that does such a huge contribution to our nation by getting these important conversations out into the ether. And so this is great to join my fellow panelists to offer some thoughts today. I'm returning from a week of travel, and unfortunately, I've hit Oklahoma, and I've got some sort of allergies that have hit me with everything that's blooming. So I'm going to do my best to keep the voice level and stable, but it's great to be here nonetheless. RJ, I'd like to start by just kind of describing my new adventure. As you noted, I retired just several months ago, moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I have taken up this the reins of the Oklahoma Cyber Innovations Institute. This is an organization that has stood up under the University of Tulsa, and I have the privilege of being the very first employee and the very first executive director of this unique institute. The institute actually has a vision and funding, which is always a good thing. And so I have received funding from two different sources. Half of my funding actually comes from the state of Oklahoma. And so RJ, you have a role in that. And that level of funding is to think about cyber workforce development at the K through 12 level across the state of Oklahoma. So what sort of education, what sort of cyber training do our students that are going through the process, what do they need to know? What's important for them? How do we get them ready for tech of the future? So that's pretty exciting. I get to think about the future of our nation by way of the students that are going through the Oklahoma school system. And so I'm thrilled with that. The other half of my funding actually comes from a family foundation called the George Kaiser Family Foundation. They are investing in Tulsa as a tech hub, Tulsa as a cybersecurity ecosystem, and they're working to attract talented companies, individuals, businesses into the Tulsa area to bring in their technology. The exciting part about both those levels of funding is the marrying up. And so I'll have an opportunity to work with businesses that are coming into the Tulsa area, understand their demands, understand their needs by way of a technology workforce, and then marry them up with those that are going through university or those that are coming out of the K through 12 system. And so it's a really exciting place to be right now. I feel the energy about what's taking place in Tulsa and across the state of Oklahoma, and I'm just privileged to be here. RJ, to your questions, I spent, as you noted, 29 years in uniform. I got to see a lot of what our nation, especially on the DoD side, was doing by way of technology of the future. I got to go through the experiences of COVID as we figured out how to get to Teams and Zoom and all of those types of things on our DoD systems. That was quite frankly groundbreaking because we were throwing policy and readjusting policy on the fly to connect all of those disparate workers to their homes. And so that was unique for what we had normally done in DoD. I've gotten to see the proliferation of commercial capabilities that have come online in DoD. Think Starlink and others that have now become commonplace in our normal day-to-day military operations. I've gotten to see a pursuit from the Air Force specifically for an as-a-service model. So we were thinking about the way that enterprise information technology was going to be consumed, the way that it was going to be acquired, and we went after new ways of doing business. We looked at other transactional authorities. So what were the acquisition rules that were in place, and then how do we break down those silos to get better and faster, to get more relevant technology into our systems? And so I've gotten to see all of that over my military career, and that was exciting to see. I think we all acknowledge that we're still not moving fast enough. And so, the particular organization that you're part of, DIU, the innovation spark plugs that are out there, those are continuing to help us innovatively think about information technology and technology as a whole in DoD. I will tell you, RJ, I've been pleasantly surprised as I've come into academia, and I'm quite frankly an outsider. I have come into the University of Tulsa. I've been here. This is now my 7th week, but I've gotten to reevaluate the way that I used to view academia versus the way that I can see it actually moving today, and so I'm happily reporting that things are moving very well. Things are getting very detailed on the way that our academians are thinking about the research and development that they do on a daily basis. No longer is it the days of just the academians that are doing research for the sake of research and doing the things that they want. They're now trying to find purpose. They're now trying to find detailed application of their research to meaningful, good things for our nation. I would call it applied research. And so, for example, we have some folks here at the University of Tulsa that are contributing on a daily basis to some software research for the Department of Defense. They actually have deliverables that they do on a daily basis to report back what their research is revealing and detailing. And so that, I think, is focused research that I think is along the lines of what we're trying to do now. We're trying to be innovative. We're trying to make sure that the work that we're doing actually connects to something meaningful. And so I'm getting to see that happen right now. I have an opportunity to work with a group of folks very closely. Under the University of Tulsa, we have a program that is actually funded by that George Kaiser Family Foundation I previously mentioned. It's called the Cyber Fellows Program. In this Cyber Fellows Program, we have 30 plus cyber professionals that are going through their normal PhD studies. They have faculty that are serving as advisors. They're taking them through that very technical background that they have. But what I think is unique about this Cyber Fellows Program is we marry up those studies of the very technical cyber, data analytics, AI, machine learning, and others. And now we bring in some entrepreneurial training as well. We have them interface with venture capitalists to make sure that the research that they're doing as part of their PhD actually can apply and become a meaningful business of the future. I think this is an example of innovation in action. I think this is an example of where academia is making a shift for the good. And so I'm just very pleased with that. Just a year ago, the University of Tulsa stood up what they called the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship under our business college. That particular institute as well, a year advanced of mine, has already made huge gains of getting not only the business school, but across all the other colleges at the University of Tulsa, to get that entrepreneurial thinking, to get that innovation spirit into all of the degree programs. And I'm thrilled to see that in action. I think about one particular cyber fellow. We're getting ready to graduate our first inaugural class of cyber fellows. 2 fellows that have gone through about 4 years of training. They're going to graduate here as doctors in the spring time frame. One of those cyber fellows actually leads our JOLT Innovation Club for the university. I think that's remarkable that we have a cyber fellow studying very high-end, complicated technical data that marries that up on a daily basis with innovation. And I just think that that's a huge gain for not only our university, our state, but for our nation. So with that, RJ, I think that I'm in a really exciting place right now. My Oklahoma Cyber Innovations Institute, I think, is at the foreground of that innovation. It's at the foreground of conversations with businesses and venture capitalists to try and figure out how do we get better and faster and more relevant. And so with that, I'm gonna stop my comments, but look forward to any questions that you may have. Over.
Well, thanks so much. All right, James, over to you now that we've heard kind of what's happening in true academic circles. We're gonna move into what I'll call the more of the blended or blended facilitator. James, we focus a lot on federal initiatives, the CHIPS Act, many of the quote 2030 initiatives like the Marine Corps Force Design 2030 or the Air Force's Science and Technology Strategy of 2030. Those are often broad strategic initiatives with associated funding. And we've seen, for example, with efforts to streamline defense acquisition processes, that oftentimes they are cumbersome and bureaucratic. But James, your work tends to be very much more practical in scope and as a tribal sovereign with a bit of a ace up your sleeve with respect to administration. Can you speak to the work that you do and how having an innovation partner like the Choctaw Nation can have unique advantages in defense innovation?
Sure, yeah, very good question. First, the Choctaw Nation is the third largest Native American tribe, or federally recognized Native American tribe. Each tribe has a unique treaty. So each tribe, the sovereignty is sort of expressed in different ways by just depending on each treaty. So we are sovereign. We're a sovereign nation under a nation. We do compacts with states. So when we work with a state government or another level of government, we always exercise compacts or enter into compacts, just like any other sovereign would. The Choctaw Nation has a very proud history of supporting our veterans and supporting national defense. We had very honored Choctaw tribal members in World War I who served before they were even recognized as citizens. So the Choctaw tribal members were serving in the military before they even had citizenship. We had the code talkers, as I'm sure you've heard about in World War I. But it's been very interesting. Kind of my background, I'm an engineer by background, undergraduate aerospace engineering. All my graduate work was mechanical engineering. I worked in defense for about 20 years. So started working with the Air Force, directly as a civilian engineer, and then I went to a large contractor, became a young VP there. But my whole first 20 years involved defense. After that 20 years, I started to get out more of the entrepreneurial world. So I had a small company. We were doing a lot of things. And then eventually I went to the University of Oklahoma as an associate vice president for research. So I've had kind of all that whole span of working directly in the defense community for both the DoD as a contractor and then going into academia. And the how I got connected with the tribe is I grew up in the heart of the Choctaw Nation reservation. Both sides of my family have grown up here, so I have very deep ties. I have deep appreciation and respect for the Choctaw culture. I grew up in the middle of it. I had left back in a time when this was a very impoverished area, had some of the highest unemployment in the country, not a lot of opportunities. The area was sort of dying, not a lot of industry here, and those of us who could go to college did. You know, we found a way to go out, and I never thought I would even come back because I didn't ever think there would be opportunities. I went to school, paid for my own school, made it through, and while I was out working in industry, working in defense, and all these other positions, the tribe started coming into its own. And with a lot of the things happened in the late 80s, the tribe became very self-sufficient, and they started making investments back into the economy, back into our local communities. And my reintroduction to the tribe was when I was at the university, when they reached out to me and said, we bought a large piece of property. We would like you to look at it. And I said, okay, you know, I'm from this area. It's almost more of a courtesy than anything else. And while I was touring the property with them, they said, we think we would like to use this for aviation. Which is pretty audacious. And I was, being the engineer, I was a little negative. I started talking about all the challenges. If you're going to get involved in emerging aviation, here's a ton of challenges. They very patiently listened to me, and then they said, could we hire you as a consultant to figure out all that stuff? And so I was sort of, you know, no promises, but yes, I'll help you. As we started digging into what the opportunities were for the tribe, I was blown away. They can leverage sovereignty in ways that actually help with a lot of the regulatory gridlock we have. And one of the things that I always struggle with in defense was, for most of our history, past few decades, the DoD was the vanguard on aviation. Literally all aviation aeronautical technology derived from the DoD, and then it found its way into civilian use and civil use. What's happened in the last 10 to 20 years is, you know, new propulsion systems, electric propulsion, electric flight. Industry was in there for a period, was actually ahead. And it became a much different issue in terms of global economic security. We have economic rivals now with China and how quickly they innovate, how quickly they're working in things. And then at the same time, we're seeing this asymmetric shift of balance with things like consumer drones, as we're seeing in Ukraine right now, how that can be very useful in a war environment. And so what started concerning me was we didn't necessarily have a relief valve. The military has restricted use airspace. The military can innovate and use their own airspace, but nothing like that exists outside of the military. And so as we were architecting what the tribe could do, we realized that they have sovereignty over the surface. They have a lot of resources. They can invest in safety infrastructure, ground-based radars, things like that. And we realized that we could create the next best thing to a military test environment where we guarantee that safety on the ground, that part of the risk, and then we can invest in the infrastructure to mitigate air risks. And so we really do think we're the next best thing to a military test range. We function like a military test range. But in terms of how the tribe's getting into it, there's multiple facets. As you talk about the P3, tribes are unique in that they can function like a business. We have a business arm. We have, in our case, we have a whole holding company of quite a few companies that we own. We can function like a government, which I'm part of the core government part. And we have all these different ways that we can operate. So we can kind of leverage that in ways that we can foster innovation. And innovation it's interesting because if you try to prescribe it, sometimes it doesn't quite occur and happen. And as you see, when big, large organizations get to a certain size, compliance is very, very important. You can't function without compliance. That compliance sometimes works against you with innovation. That's why we see tremendous success stories of 2 or 3 young people get together in their garage or at Starbucks, and they hatch an idea, and then they create something that's disruptive to technology, to industry. And so every large organization struggles with that. And as we're seeing the things that are happening, especially with the UAS, with electric propulsion there, AAM, as we see the convergence of things like generative AI, all of these things are creating immense opportunities, but it's also creating a situation in this world where we've never faced the threats that we have globally. And we now have to consider economic security at the same level that we consider our national security. That's part of our defense strategy now. So it's very interesting. I'm kind of a lifelong observer of how does innovation happen? How do you foster that environment? And at the point we're at right now with the tribe, we have a small agile group. We're kind of carved out where we're doing our own thing. And so we've recreated that initial entrepreneurial part at our test range and our test facilities where we're doing that. We're developing our own vehicles. We're doing a whole lot of kind of innovation for the tribe itself. But moving ahead, we have to figure out how we leverage, and as part of acquisition reform, we have to figure out how we leverage the strengths of industry. Some ways we've been here before the late 50s where we had the Defense Production Act and things like that. But we have to figure out how we leverage that in ways that's going to benefit our national economic security. And I love the things that have been happening with things like Agility Prime and the Replicator program, some of these other things. These, to me, are acquisition reform programs that are going to be successful. But yeah, it's something that I've been really excited about. We're doing some really neat things. The Choctaw Nation has had a lot of historic firsts in aviation. Been a point of great pride. The tribe literally came from nowhere 5 or 6 years ago, did this from scratch, and it's really paying some big dividends. So I'll stop there.
Outstanding. Now to our last question, Kevin, we know that having a great idea, like what James mentioned, 3 guys in a garage who have a great disruptive idea, or the capability to innovate, like partnering with Chad's Institute at the University of Tulsa, sometimes that's not enough for an emerging business or a group of founders to keep their organization surviving long enough to be able to develop what we'll consider meaningful products, or to be able to scale to the level of production needed to have meaningful impact in defense innovation or in dual-use technologies. Can you speak to the perspective of venture capital on the dual-use thesis? What developments have occurred in the industry around American defense innovation broadly, and how VC partners help founders and builders translate their vision into viable businesses, and by virtue of that, new and novel and emerging dual-use capabilities?
Well, thanks so much for the question, and I really think it's a fascinating moment to look at this dual-use thesis and the recognition, if you just look around the world, of the importance of commercial technology on the battlefield. I mean, take Ukraine as an example. It's come up in this conversation already. The use of commercial drones, cell phones, other widely available commercial devices, it's having a real impact on the way that the conflict's being prosecuted, and I think there's a lot of lessons from that. Not only for the Department of Defense, but also for entrepreneurs to think about the uses of these technologies. And for us as investors, we're it's one thing to be a group of 3 founders in a garage and launch an app. It's another to invent the next semiconductor, to create the next quantum technology that's going to have an impact on defense missions and so on. Some of what we call these deep tech, frontier tech technologies that require more time, more access to infrastructure, often more technical expertise. And so our role as investors is to really help bring the capital that's necessary, but also the coaching. And if you look at the team and the teams that are doing this very well right now as investors, they have a really deep understanding of the defense need. They also have kind of an understanding of where the technology is going, and they can help coach some of these new startups into the right parts of the Department of Defense. And that can mean finding, where's the right program executive office to work with? What's the right application of this technology? How might you find early and rapid experimentation, customer feedback? In a previous role, before working with America's Frontier Fund, I was at the Defense Innovation Unit, what used to be called DIU 2.0. Now it's DIU 3.0. And under DIU 2.0, we really focused on speed to contract and speed to prototype, right? So how can you get this technology in the hands of users and then rapidly iterate such that you're improving it and meeting the mission need faster and faster? And you see some of the things that James mentioned, some of these more recent programs like Agility Prime and Replicator really building on that to get to mass. So we have one instance of a successful prototype. How do we get to 1,000? How can we have 1,000 unmanned systems ready to operate, autonomously and in a formation? So for us as investors, we have a unique model at America's Frontier Fund where we have a fund, Frontier Fund 1 Alpha, that focuses on scaling capital, but we also have an incubation program called Roadrunner Venture Studios, and that is really taking an idea and helping to turn it into a company. That earlier stage, people talk about the valley of death, but really there are multiple valleys of death. There's from an idea to a prototype, and then there's a prototype to scale, and you could even say a successful scale to international. Those are all 3 different potential valleys of death that need help from often different investors, but different skill sets as well. And so for us, when we're focused on this early incubation stage, thinking about how to get, first prototype, first revenue with the Department of Defense or with another government customer, it's a lot of coaching. And even if you have, especially in these frontier technologies where you have a lot of technical expertise required, you may not have the business or financial expertise. If you're working with a university professor who's founding a company or a national lab, a PhD level technical individual, you have to pair that technical expertise with the understanding of the business model for a dual use company, and then also with the mission need. And that's where often another thing that investors that do this well can do is help build the right partnerships. And it's not just a single startup operating, but it's operating an ecosystem, whether with defense primes or other partners that can help understand the mission need, bring the capability to the Department of Defense, and then scale it as well. So it's really an exciting time when it comes to defense innovation and dual use. You see a lot more funds focused on this, and rightly so, because the arsenal of democracy is built on technology. We have to make sure that we have our qualitative edge in terms of technology, and it's often these innovative young companies that are bringing the most disruption. And the faster we can experiment and then scale it into the Department of Defense, I think the more successful we'll be, and the better our deterrence capability will be as well.
Outstanding. Well, as we close in on our time here, there's a few things that I wanted to call to the forefront that our great panelists have pulled out. Some items that have stood out to me. One, talking a lot about outsiders moving into new or novel institutions, bringing a wealth of experience to an area that may not have been able to benefit from that experience, that they're starting to work into innovating not just technologies, but also institutions, processes, and programs as well. Another, having a startup mindset. I think everyone has mentioned talking about having the ability to not just be technically sound or understanding the military case or the mission case, but also to know that this is not in a silo, that you have to be able to operate these businesses. So having a startup mindset, a business founder's mindset, thinking of also the business element of what we're discussing, talking also about purpose-driven applied research and the mission set and capabilities, right? This is not research for its own sake. There is a broader mission, and we know that to understand both in terms of economic security, but also national security and national defense. Again, putting the dual in dual use technologies. And finally, speed and rapidity. We are not the only country running this race, and so it is incumbent upon us as technologists, researchers, academics, capital partners, and people who work in the government to also help facilitate the pace of operation and the tempo at which we're operating. So again, I want to say thank you to our panelists, Chad Raduege, Kevin McGinnis, James Grimsely, for the great insights in facilitating dual-use innovation. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. Okay, and then if you'd like to find out more about our panelists or what they are working on, you can feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn, and you can also reach out directly to James at uas@choctawnation.com, or you can reach out to Chad-Raduege, that's Raduege at utulsa.edu, and you can get in contact with Kevin at kevin@americasfrontier.org. And feel free to reach out to me as well, richard.jackson@oag.ok.gov. For Kevin, Chad, and James, and on behalf of America's Future Series, I'm Richard Jackson. Thank you for joining us.